welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Blueprint, powered by Lapolis Electric, and I'm your host, Stephen Marcelino, Vice President of Sales with Lapolis Electric. And I'm here today with a great friend to myself and Carmine Lapolis, Sisto Martello. Sisto, thank you for coming on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Just a little background on Sisto. Sisto is the president and CEO of Design 2147, in which they specialize in all things permitting, expediting, building code consultation, and zoning consultation. Sisto, again, thank you for coming. And tell us a little bit about design and what you guys do and some of your notable projects.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here. You've been on my podcast.
I have.
So actually twice. And you've done a great job, and I'm excited to be on your podcast. To host a podcast is a great thing. It's a big responsibility. You represent Lapolis Electric, that's been around a long time with an incredible reputation. So first, I'd like to say to you, congratulations.
Thank you.
And look forward to hearing the show, watching the show, and seeing the guests that you have. So having me as a guest is an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sisto.
Design's been around. Next month will be our 38th year.
Wow.
We've been in the 5 boroughs, and we specialize in entitlement, getting approvals, permits, certificates of occupancies, as well as consulting, from code to zoning to anything in between. We've done a lot of incredible projects, a lot of hotels, a lot of colleges. We do a lot of work at different universities throughout the city. So,
Very nice.
we don't really specialize in one thing, kind of like Lapolis.
Yep.
You do residential towers, but next week you could be doing a museum. Next week you could be doing a dorm. Week after you could be doing, an office fit out or a hotel.
100%. And that's, especially in the New York City market, you have to be diverse.
No question about it, because you don't know which sector is going to be hot and which one
never
doesn't
know.
get so hot after a while.
And aside from being diverse as a business, you also can't, pigeonhole yourself, and say, I only want to take $1 million projects.
Correct.
You have to be willing to for us at least, we have to be willing to go. And if the job is to change a single light fixture, we'll change a single light fixture.
You don't know where the next job's going to come from.
If the job is to build a 60-story tower in Hudson Yards, we'll build a 60-story tower.
Exactly.
But we're never going to tell somebody, no, we don't do that, and our pricing is never out of control.
We have
either.
projects as little as $525 to projects that are several $100,000. So
That's it.
In consulting, that's just the way it is. If a client calls and says, hey, I need you to look at this violation, we say, sure, because we don't know where the next big job comes from. And, if they were only big jobs, then probably, I don't even know if it would be that much fun. I think it would be boring.
It's like
and
a
I don't think the
grindhouse
margins are right for us to be profitable. I think you need a mixture of all of that.
You do. So you said you guys deal with some code consultation over there at Design, and I know on our last episode we spoke a lot about NFPA 70E, NFPA 70B. What is your take on 70E and 70B? Only being introduced on a federal and an OSHA and level as of 2023. What do you feel? How do you feel about that?
I've been around, and I've seen a lot of laws come and go. And on my show, myself personally, as well as the firm, we're very pro-law. We believe that the people behind NFPA look at things nationwide. They understand where the problems are. They understand that, from a safety standpoint, not just the safety of the people that are occupying the building, but the people that, are actually working on the systems like your firm, as well as, the structure itself, that there needs to be preventive things. So in New York City, many years ago, we had an issue with standpipe where firemen died because someone removed a section of the standpipe. The fire department showed up. They hooked up the water to it, and the water went nowhere. So they created rules, right? They created a dry standpipe with an alarm that the minute the pressure is lost, an alarm rings and says somebody tampered with this, right? So sometimes tragedy has to happen, unfortunately, to create new laws. So when you came in and we spoke about NFPA 70, I was like, wow. wow, that's really, really a city of this magnitude
Yeah, it's
with
crazy.
huge buildings that there's nothing that says an owner of a building is supposed to open up their switchgear every couple of years and go in there and make sure that there's no rodents living in it, or there's spider webs in it, or there's bad contacts, there's erosion. So, when you told me about it, I was like really, really taken back by it.
And that's the big thing, 70B has been in place for years now as a, recommended practice.
Right, and I think that's what caught me by surprise.
Yeah.
It's, hey, you should change your oil in your car every 3,000
Yeah.
miles. Okay, well, it's recommended, but how many people really do it, right? Here, you're talking about life safety. You're talking about, fires that can start. You're talking about building owners losing voltage and amperage throughout their building, causing delays and problems and
Business interruption. Yep.
Correct, which is, we've had many discussions, you and I, even outside of our podcast about this, because it is your passion. And I was taken back by it, and I would love to see the city be more proactive with it, because I think even for myself as a multiple building owner, I don't call my electrician and go, hey, by the way, if you got nothing to do, send a couple of guys over for a few $1,000s and check all my equipment. No, you wait till something goes wrong. And that's because if it was mandated like an elevator, if it was mandated like your sprinkler, like your standpipe, we wouldn't have a choice, and we'd all be doing it. So I'm hoping that in the long run, NFPA can get to all the states, especially New York.
Yeah, and I think as of right now, from like a federal level, and on the insurance side, there are people enforcing it. There's, authorities having jurisdiction that are backing this. It's just on a local, municipal and state level, like you just mentioned, they really need to get more proactive and kind of be that driving force, like a local.
And I think there's so many laws
or,
like that. We have we have annual boiler inspections. Now we have annual, we had facade inspections, and yet we still had tragedies, right? Now we're going to get garage inspections are coming up now for structural because of decay. They're very old, and those things for 100 years never existed, and all of a sudden you get tragedy, and the next thing you know, we have a loss. So hopefully we don't get any tragedy, and we see NFPA, be able to convince the local municipalities to put it in place.
No, it's really important, and NFPA has a statistic, and don't quote me on the exact percentage, but it's between 74 and 76% of building fires are caused by the electrical infrastructure.
Oh.
So, NFPA, IEEE, all these renowned,
Fire is dead. I mean, electrical is deadly.
People call it's the silent enemy. You don't see it; it's invisible, and if you hear it, you're hearing it because there's a problem coming, and you better turn.
You hear that hum, and you better go.
you better get out of the room, and call in an expert to diagnose the problem, like Lapolis.
Right.
And really, it's just a matter of mitigating these electrical fires, hazards, and building interruptions, and that's kind of the mission of my division at Lapolis. Like we had mentioned earlier, not pigeonholing and maintaining diverse, and that's kind of what we focus on.
And it's a new market.
100%, especially in New York, because we're a part of a, like I mentioned, a national franchise, international franchise, and other parts of the country and the world have been extremely proactive for the past, 30-plus years.
And it's amazing because you would think that New York City is like the epicenter of so much, and yet we're behind in certain things.
Extremely behind, and I think it's due to a lot of like aesthetics and all that stuff. A lot of these buildings.
I think there's just so many buildings, and there's so many people that have a say that to pass
100%
takes time. Nothing happens quickly.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's my common struggle is a building manager weighing out, all right, do we put a new painting in the lobby or do we maintain the electrical infrastructure? A lot of it is based on pleasing the tenants.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't realize, like, all right, well, if they lose power, they're going to be way more upset than if you had a painting in the lobby. So a lot of what I do is I'll go in,
But your field and maintaining the electric is not sexy.
No.
Being an expediter is not sexy.
It's not sexy, but it's necessary.
But it's necessary.
100%. And just a quick, to throw it out there, to get to the point of actually putting together that whole program, the electrical preventative maintenance program, it's an investment of my time.
Sure.
So for me to go into these buildings and walk the infrastructure and work with my engineering
And
team,
give them suggestions.
to develop these scopes and suggestions, monetarily, it's free of charge. It's an investment of my time and Lapolis Electric's time on the front end, because we truly do believe that this is to help mitigate these electrical fires, hazards, and building interruptions. And we're willing to go in there and help the people in the front end to kind of explain to them how this works.
And for you to give them your consulting services to show them that, hey, this is serious. This is, and I think a lot of times management companies and building owners just don't know.
They don't.
They just
It's a
don't
matter
know.
of education.
And it's not because they don't want to know. They're not educated with it.
Yeah.
You know, and I get it.
And in all credit to the management companies and the building owners or facilities engineers, you know, they're not just handling electric.
Right.
They're typically handling full MEP on top of tenant concerns and all the
everything
other
else in between.
Everything else in between.
From keeping the place clean, keeping the place safe,
Yep.
security. You go on and on and on. So
Yeah, it's like, you know, the list will drop to the floor with the duties of a lot of these
100%.
engineers. So shifting gears a little bit, Sisto, let me ask you, because I know it's a topic that you and I both, you know, find a lot of joy in. How important has your podcast been when it came to raising awareness about code, safety, and your overall brand?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So just to give a little insight about the podcast, I really wasn't looking to do a podcast, and my children were joking around because they're always listening to podcasts of something, whether it's on food or it's on health and it's on sports. The kids were joking around, Dad, you should start a podcast. And I had met the crew from Why Not You Media, where we're filming today.
Yep.
Through meeting Michael, Tony, and Fran, we were able to talk about, maybe the possibility of doing a podcast. And they did some great research for us. And the research was based around, well, who else is doing what we do? Who else has a podcast? What can they bring? How do we educate, the viewers? What's it about? And lo and behold, we really didn't find much of anything. And that kind of really started the concept of the podcast. And then, like yourself, just starting out, it's, well, what do we want to talk about? Who do we bring? And I think that for me, it was having a connection with the guests. So you were on my show, and there was a connection. It's not just about how knowledgeable you might be or the company you work for, but there's a human connection with the person, and I think that's important. And I think that type of feeling comes out in the podcast. It makes it easy. But what has happened is I now go away, and this weekend I was up at at SCUP, which is Society for Colleges and University Programming, and they had a convention, the North Atlantic, up in Boston. And it's all colleges and university from New York all the way up to Maine. And I ran into people like, hey, I watch your podcast. It's great. It's so informative. And, it's really a great feeling because it not only says a lot about our company, that we are the experts. Correct. We know the hot topics that are going on, just like you and I talking about NFPA70. It usually doesn't come up at dinner time at my table. Maybe at yours because your dad's in the business. But in reality, we when we get home at night, we kind of get away from our day-to-day business. But when we're out there, people look at us, like yourself, hosting a podcast as an expert. So the podcast has not only brought attention to me personally after almost 40 years of being in the business, but it's also brought attention to my firm that we are the subject matter experts. And, again, here we go. Carmine's been around a long time. I don't mean that in a bad way, Carmine. You're a little bit older than me, but not much, right? But at the end of the day, his brand has been around for that period. And people associate professionalism with that brand. And so I think the podcast is an education tool. Yeah. I think it's also it's a way to have people that may not know a lot about electric that'll tune into the podcast and be educated.
And it's very interesting what you just said, and I have a real life example too, just from being on your podcast. A couple months ago I was interviewing for, to bring on a new rep on my team. we're growing our department, and I was interviewing a couple new sales reps. I probably interviewed like 10 or 15 guys, men and women. And out of the 15 candidates, about 8 of them came in and said, we watched your podcast, and they did, they were doing their research on Lepolis, and they learned a lot about the company through the podcast. So when they sat down for the interview, they already knew who they were dealing with. And
more importantly, and I agree with that a lot, but they also learned a lot about you.
Yeah.
They heard you, they saw you, your confidence just being on the show, and you'd think that, oh my God, if you put in Lepolis Electric, there'd be 9,000 hits. But in reality, it went right to the podcast. And the same thing happens with ours. We just filmed our 40th show.
Wow.
Congratulations. And the one thing that I would say about the podcast is there are no rules for it. There is, I'm going to do 2 podcasts. I'm going to be the next greatest influencer in the world of electrical. Well, if that's what your goal is, then maybe this isn't the venue you want. My goal with the podcast was to be informative to our clients about multitude of topics. Today we talked about NFPA70. I don't know what the next topic you want to talk about on your next podcast, but over time you will build this library of information and connections with people. And the more you're in it, the more people will tune in and find it, informative.
Yeah.
And I think it's not about the next job. It's about getting to the next person.
No, I think it's bigger than, of course, it's always nice to generate, opportunities from the podcast, but I think it's bigger than that in terms of brand awareness. And, Fran and I, when we were discussing the podcast opportunity for Lepolis Electric to get to where we are today, it's about building the brand for the future, because there's going to come a day where, the circle of life happens and we all move on, and pass, and whatever happens.
And that's a legacy you're going to leave behind.
And this will be the legacy for Lepolis Electric and the people that have come on the podcast to speak about what they do, what I do, and everything in between.
If I could just share one moment in time, and it was in this office when I was meeting with Fran and Michael and Tony, is that they had asked me some questions. And one of the questions that they asked me is, so why are you doing this? And if the answer is because I want more customers, if the answer is because I want to make more money, I don't think it would ever be as successful as it is. And there was no expectation. I wasn't looking for 1 million viewers. I wasn't looking for the next job. I was looking for it to be a place where people could tune in and get educated about what I do in New York City and the metropolitan area. So I think, Stephen, that you're doing a very similar track.
Yeah.
But you also got, 40 years like design with Lepolis, that the brand is there, but now it's about taking it to another place. And I think that in today's media world, what I've learned is I'm not looking to reach 1 million people.
Yeah.
I'm looking to meet the few hundred people each week that want to get educated about what I do.
100%.
And it's been a credible success. You have to be like a relief pitcher. Sometimes you come in and you strike the side out and you get the save, and sometimes you give up the home run and you lose the game. But you got a short memory. You go on to the next show. Not every show is perfect. Nope. Life is not perfect, and podcasts aren't meant to be perfect. No. They're supposed to be flowing.
I've watched, leading up to coming in here, I've watched some of the biggest hosts in the world, Patrick Bet-David, Joe Rogan.
Sure.
The list goes on of great podcasters that are out there. And I went back in their libraries to their first episode.
You see how it's evolved.
That's where the notebook came from. Patrick Bet-David started podcasting by having a notebook just in case the flow needed to keep up or, have some questions. I'm doing 4 or 5 episodes a day.
Sure.
My brain can only handle so much.
Yeah, and I'm the opposite. No pad.
That's it.
I just like to be in contact with the guest, like I am with you, and just free flow it. So everybody has a different way, but
You know,
They work.
And it's truly interesting too. Like you see, you know, every podcast is different. How, you know, from the notepad to the way the studios are set up. You know, some people have like life-size figures of Iron Man and Batman behind them. You know, whatever it is, and every podcast is its own. The guests that come on are all, you know,
to me, the biggest part of the podcast is the guests that come on and are genuine.
Agreed.
When it's genuine, the audience sees it. So the more genuine it is for me, I believe the more people connect.
Yep.
So, you know, even like today, I was excited, you know.
Very excited.
To come in and just talk to you because, you know, to me, you know, being just your friend is important to me.
Yeah,
but being on the show to talk about what you have a passion for, like the preventive maintenance and the electrical systems, you know, to me, I don't know anything about it, but yet I can connect to it. And it makes sense. It's common sense. How do you not take care of your building? How do you not look at your electrical panels? But it happens every day somewhere, even in our own homes.
Yep.
You know, and
true.
we have our families there. We have our children there. We may have our grandparents there. We may have our own parents there. Who knows? But if there's one place you want to do it, it's probably in your own house, right? Forget about the office building where I work.
Yeah.
The fire alarm's going to go off. I'm going to run outside.
You're sleeping in the middle of the night. The last thing you want to do is
exactly.
What's that smell? Wake up.
but there's a perfect example of how you came in to talk about commercial high-rise buildings, which is the sweet spot for what you do. But then you can take that and your audience can say, but wait a second. I've lived in this house 23 years. I never called my electrician to open up my panel. Maybe I should do that, right? And we laugh about it because to us it's common sense. I don't do it. There is something that could be learned in every podcast as long as your ears are open and you're listening.
Yeah, and even me, like on the home front, you know, it's so my house where I live, you know, I'm in like almost in the middle of the woods, so. We lose power like 6 times a year, minimum.
Yeah, we have a generator because we're always out.
If the cloud moves over the sun a certain way, we lose power. You know, so you would think electrician, you know, generators, the whole nine, that I have a nice automatic setup. I don't. My generator, if I lose power, I'm calling, you know, I got guy, hey, I need you to bring wire over my house. We're changing spark plugs in the middle of a rainstorm. You know, and it's like, we're so focused, hyper-focused on helping other people.
Right.
You know, we have to spend some time, like you said, look at our own houses, look at our own infrastructure.
Listen, in the next several months, right, I've been married 35 years. We're going on our 36th
God bless.
year.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I was told a long time ago, happy wife, happy life. So after 3 or 4 years of every time the power went out, and she's like, well, when's it going to come back on? I said, I don't know. And then finally I was like, okay, you know what? I am not going to take a vacation. I'm going to put in a generator. And we've had a generator at both our homes, one here in Connecticut and one up in the country. Can't live without it now.
No.
Because
you can't beat it.
You can't beat it. But yet, there's a perfect example of, okay, so when was the last time we opened the transfer switch?
Yep.
When was the last time we looked in there? It's outside. Did you go outside and, you know, I have my generator serviced every year. But what's still amazing, and we go all the way back around, is how is it not required?
I know.
That, okay, I'm not saying every year, but once every 5 years?
Something.
Once every 10 years? Never?
Never, yeah.
Never until something's wrong?
And that's, like you had mentioned earlier, you know, everybody does the elevators, the fire
the
alarm
boilers,
systems,
the
mechanical,
sprinkler, right?
You know?
Nobody looks at the switchgear.
Aside from it being required or not, just the simple mindset of, all right, well, if we lose our electric, none of this stuff's going to work.
That's right.
You know? And you don't want to find out, especially with a generator system in an emergency, that an ATS isn't going to properly transfer.
I know. And,
whatever the
again,
the situation is.
You think of so many different situations. People have young children. People have elderly people in their home. You know, and you know, you have elderly people in your home, and you have the start of a fire and smoke. It's deadly.
It's terrible. So to raise the spirits a little, like you do at the end of a show, I want to ask you a question. I know, aside from being an expert in your field, there's a lot of, underlying, tasks that we need to fulfill on a day-to-day basis to be successful. And I know you have, you have a passion for networking.
Yes.
And you like meeting people and talking to people and
Powers
golf.
in the people.
So tell me a little bit about, networking and how important that is to you and just business in general.
Well, that's a great question. I think that people believe that networking has a certain, ROI, return on investment, that should be immediate. It should be immediate gratification, and that is definitely not true. There is two things that I would say about networking is the first is the power of people. You have to believe in people. If you don't believe in people, don't join any networking groups. Sit behind a computer, do whatever you normally do. But if you don't believe that people will connect you with other people who then will connect you with other people who then will connect you and connect you and connect you, then networking isn't your thing.
Well, you and I met through networking.
Right, exactly.
We met through Tony. What did we play around the golf or something?
Played around
like
the
that
golf
with him?
together, yeah.
You got to see the way I dress, but not the way I swing. And that was fun. And then I connected you with Carmine, and
then we
so
had
on
mutual,
and so forth.
and we had mutual clients.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful day. It went full circle. It went from Tony connecting you and I to the four of us, me, you, Tony, and Carmine, playing golf at his beautiful
Right.
club,
And
Westchester
if on that
Hills.
day you're like, gotta go play golf again with somebody I don't know, you'll never meet anybody. And I'm a big quote kind of person.
Yeah.
I really love Winston Churchill. But there's certain quotes that people say, and one of them is from Tom Thibodeau from the New York Knicks, and he's a quirky guy.
Yep.
But one of his greatest lines is, "The magic is in the work."
It's true.
There's no silver bullet. There's no silver bullet in networking. You got to pack up. You got to get in your car like tonight on a rainy night. You got to go down to a restaurant to meet some people.
Yep.
The easy route is, well, it's going to rain. I don't feel like spending 2 hours to go down there, spend an hour at dinner, and 2 hours back to Connecticut in the pouring rain. But you got to do it.
You got to.
That's the work.
And perfect example, the day I was on your show, I was having the wisdom tooth problem. 2 days later, I got them extracted, that Thursday, Friday. And then Tuesday, I had an obligation to go to an IFMA networking event downtown, all the way in the Flatiron District.
Right.
I just had my wisdom teeth pulled. I did not want to go.
Of course not.
But I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, which I've done throughout my entire life, and I, went down there. And honestly, probably one of the best networking events I've been to in a long time.
Yeah, and also part of the networking stuff, too, is choosing the right network.
Yep.
Right? We get asked to be on hundreds of them. People ask me to join. I basically belong to two of them. And the rest of them are what I call the Sisto Says Network, which is my podcast. All the guests that I have, we meet. But networking is a mindset.
Yep.
I think people treat it almost like a process.
Or like a job.
Yes, where for me, it's a mindset.
And it should be fun.
If it's not fun, then don't do it.
Don't.
Do you feel like sitting in your car for 2 hours to go and have dinner with someone you don't want to be with? Of course not. You want to be around people that give you energy.
Yep.
Me, I just turned 59 years old. I love hanging out with young entrepreneurs like yourself, that you have a vision for a company that's been around a long time, and you are willing to put that brand on the back of your shoulders and promote it. You know what, Stephen? That's not easy. That's not easy for you. That's not easy for a marketing company. But if you do it and you're committed to it and you believe in people and you believe in hard work, good things will happen. But if you're going to find shortcuts before you even start, you're doomed before you even start. And Fran and I talked about this many times about the podcast. Yeah, today you may have me on the show, but, maybe in 2 years from now, you'll have somebody from NFPA70 come in and talk about it because you started somewhere and they saw this show and they're able to take it to the next place.
And it gives other people a platform and an opportunity to speak on a public level.
Without a doubt.
And listen, Sisto, I just want to thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much
This
for
was
coming
great.
down and
Keep
you know
up the
giving
great
us
work.
thank you and giving us a great opportunity for another great episode. Again, thank you all for listening to the Beyond the Blueprint podcast, powered by Lapolis Electric. I'm your host, Stephen Marcelino. Hope you all have a great day.